I was standing in a hallway on the 14th floor of a glass office building in Midtown Atlanta, holding my phone against my chest, when I heard his voice through the conference room door. He was laughing. That big, easy laugh I used to love. The one that used to make me feel like everything was going to be okay.
She's always been like that.
He was saying to someone,
Smart enough to think she's capable, not smart enough to know the difference.
More laughter. My attorney had just hung up 30 seconds before. The papers were signed. The wire transfer was confirmed. And Brandon Keith Carter, my husband of 10 years, was in that room telling his colleagues that his wife would never amount to anything. He had no idea whose building he was standing in. He had no idea that in 11 minutes, his entire world was going to collapse. Live. In front of everyone he was trying to impress. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we got here, I need to take you all the way back to the beginning. If you're watching this right now, drop your city and your local time in the comments. I want to know who's up with me tonight. And if this story hits different, subscribe and hit that like button. Because trust me, you are going to want to hear every second of what happened next. It started like most painful things do, with a moment I almost missed. My name is Dominique Elaine Carter. I am 37 years old. I am a software engineer turned CEO, born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. And for the last 10 years, I called Atlanta home. But before I tell you about the woman I became, I need to tell you about the woman I was trying so hard to be. I graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in computer science when I was 22, magna cum laude. My mama, Dorothy Jean Washington, drove 4 hours from Savannah in her church shoes to watch me walk across that stage. She cried the whole way through. I kept it together until I saw her face in the crowd, and then I lost it completely. That woman worked double shifts at Candler Hospital for 18 years, so I could sit in classrooms and dream bigger than our zip code allowed. Every line of code I ever wrote, I wrote with her hands in mind. I landed a position at a mid-sized tech firm in Midtown Atlanta called Veridian Systems 6 weeks after graduation. Junior engineer, $62,000 a year. To a 22-year-old from Savannah, that number felt like the whole world. I was good at my job. Not just good, I was the kind of engineer that other engineers came to when something didn't make sense. I had a gift for seeing systems the way most people couldn't, not just what they did, but why they broke, and how to build them so they wouldn't break again.
Dominique, the ceiling in this building is not your ceiling. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.
My director, a sharp woman named Sandra Okafor, told me that in my first annual review. I wrote that down and kept it in my desk drawer for years. I met Brandon Keith Carter at a happy hour in Buckhead on a Thursday evening in late September 2011. He was 31. I was 26. He walked in like he owned the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark suit, that laugh already filling up the space before he even found a seat. He worked in sales at a software company called Nexigen Solutions. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming completely effortlessly, like breathing.
You're the most interesting person in this room and you don't even know it.
He found me in the corner talking shop with a colleague and said that. I told him that was a strange thing to say to someone he'd never met.
That's how you know it's true.
I know how that sounds now. But back then, that man made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I was 26, working 70-hour weeks, eating lunch at my desk and forgetting to call my mama back. Brandon showed up, and suddenly there was someone asking me how my day was and actually waiting for the answer. Someone who held my hand at dinner and said,
Tell me everything.
We dated for 2 years. He proposed on the rooftop of the Luz Atlanta Hotel on a Saturday night in December 2013. I said yes before he finished the sentence. In those early years, Brandon was proud of me. Genuinely, visibly proud. He used to introduce me at parties by saying,
This is my wife. She's the smartest woman in any room she walks into.
He'd squeeze my hand when he said it. I believed every word. We bought a house on Cascade Road in Southwest Atlanta in 2015. 2,200 square feet. 3 bedrooms, a big kitchen, a back porch, where we used to sit on Sunday mornings with coffee and talk about nothing and everything. It was a good life. A real life. The kind I had worked for and dreamed about. I want you to hold on to that image for a moment, those Sunday mornings on that porch, because what came after was so different, so dark that I sometimes struggled to believe it was the same house, the same man, the same marriage. My best friend during all of this was Priya Nair. We had met at Viridian Systems. In my second year, she was a product manager, brilliant, funny, the kind of woman who could walk into a boardroom and dismantle an entire argument with 4 sentences and a smile. Priya and I used to eat lunch together every day and complain about the same things, the meetings that should have been emails, the credit that went to the wrong people, the slow, grinding frustration of being the most capable person in a room that wasn't designed to see you. It was Priya who first planted the seed. We were sitting in Piedmont Park on a Tuesday afternoon in the summer of 2016, eating sandwiches, watching the city move around us. She pulled out her notebook. She always had a notebook and showed me 3 pages of ideas she'd been developing. An education technology platform, something that could bring high-quality learning tools to under-resourced schools across the South. She looked at me and said,
I can build the product side, but I need someone who can build the architecture. I need you, Dom.
I went home that night and told Brandon about it over dinner. His reaction was not what I expected. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just kept eating. Then he looked up and said,
That's cute. But let's be real, Dominique. You don't have what it takes to run something. You're just a coder. You sit in a corner and type. That's not real leadership. You wouldn't know how to run a company if someone handed it to you.
I remember the way the room felt after those words, like the temperature dropped 5 degrees. I laughed it off. I told myself he was just being practical, protective even, that he didn't want me to get hurt chasing something unrealistic. Looking back now, that was the moment. Right there at that dinner table, with my half-eaten food in front of me and that laugh dying on my lips that was the first time Brandon Carter deliberately made me smaller. And I let him, because I loved him, because I was scared, because some part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl from Savannah with big dreams and no roadmap, wondered if maybe he was right. I didn't say yes to Priya that night. But I didn't say no either. And I remember one other thing about that evening. When I got up to clear the dishes, Brandon got a text. I wasn't trying to see it, I just happened to glance over. He turned the phone face down before I could read a word. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself that for a lot longer than I should have. Here is what nobody tells you about a marriage that is slowly going wrong. It doesn't happen all at once. There is no single moment where everything shatters and you look around at the pieces and think, yes, this is where it ended. It happens in inches. In small surrenders you don't even notice you're making. A comment you let slide. A dream you quietly put back on the shelf. A version of yourself you stop defending because it's just easier not to fight. That's how it happened with me and Brandon. The year after that dinner conversation, I said yes to Priya, not loudly. Not with a business plan and a launch date. I said yes, the way you say yes to something you're still half afraid of quietly in the background after everyone else has gone to sleep. We started building EduRise on evenings and weekends. I told Brandon it was a side project, a hobby. He didn't ask many questions about it because he didn't think it mattered. That indifference, that complete and total dismissal of something I was pouring my soul into, hurt more than any argument we ever had. But at the time, I used it as fuel. I told myself, fine, I'll show you. What I didn't know was that while I was building something in secret, Brandon was destroying something in secret too. 2017 was the year the cracks in our marriage stopped being hairline fractures and started being something I could fall into. Brandon had started coming home later. Not dramatically late, not the kind of late that sets off alarms. 40 minutes, an hour. He'd walk in smelling like restaurant food and say he had a client dinner, a work thing, a drinks meeting that ran long. I believed him. He was in sales, late nights were part of the territory. I'd leave a plate in the oven and go back to my laptop and keep working on EduRise code until my eyes gave out. But then there was the night of my company's annual recognition dinner. Viridian Systems held it every year at the Intercontinental Hotel on Peachtree Road. Black tie, open bar, the kind of event where they dim the lights and read out names and everyone claps. That year, my director Sandra had nominated me for the Senior Engineer of the Year award. I found out 3 weeks before, and I was quietly, privately thrilled. I didn't make a big deal of it. I just asked Brandon to be there.
Of course, wouldn't miss it.
The night of the dinner, I got dressed in a floor-length burgundy gown that I'd spent 2 weeks looking for. I did my hair. I put on the pearl earrings my mama gave me when I graduated. I looked in the mirror and I felt like myself, fully, completely myself, in a way I hadn't felt in a while.
Running late. Go ahead, I'll meet you there.
Brandon texted that at 6:45 in the evening. I went ahead. They called my name at 8:15 in the evening. I walked up to that stage alone.
Dominique Washington Carter is the kind of engineer this industry was built for.
Sandra hugged me at the podium and said that into the microphone. The room applauded. I held that award and smiled and looked out at 250 people clapping for me. Brandon's seat was empty the entire night. He came home at 11 at night. I was sitting on the couch in my gown award in my lap, still in my heels because I hadn't moved since I walked in the door.
Something came up. Big client, you understand.
He walked in, saw my face, and said that. I said, "You missed it, Brandon."
It's a work thing, Dominique. It's not like it was the Grammys.
I didn't say another word. I put the award in the hall closet and went to bed. 3 days later, Priya called me.
I need to tell you something,
She said.
and I need you to hear me out before you say anything.
She had been at Ponce City Market that same Saturday evening picking up dinner. She saw Brandon at a table near the window. He was not alone. He was with a woman, younger, bright smile, leaning in close, in the way that people do when they want to be closer and are trying not to show it. They were laughing. Priya said the way he was looking at that woman, she had never seen Brandon look at me that way. Not in years. I felt something cold move through my chest when she said that. "Are you sure it was him?"
Dominique,
She said softly.
I'm sure.
That weekend, I did something I had never done in 10 years of marriage. I went through the joint credit card statement. Restaurant on Northside Drive, a Tuesday night, Brandon said he had a conference call. Hotel reservation in Buckhead. A weekend, Brandon said he was visiting his college friend Marcus in Charlotte. A jewelry store on Peachtree Street, a purchase I had never seen for a piece of jewelry I had never received. My hands were steady when I found it. That scared me more than the shaking would have. I confronted Brandon that Sunday morning. I laid the printed statements on the kitchen table between us like evidence. I kept my voice level. I asked him to explain. He looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. And then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a caught laugh. A dismissive, almost bored laugh that told me he had prepared for this moment and was not afraid of it at all.
You went through my finances.
He said.
Like I'm some kind of criminal you're investigating.
Our finances, I said. And I'm your wife. I'm asking you a question.
Priya has always been jealous of what we have.
He said, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, completely at ease.
She's been trying to get in your head since day one. You're going to let her paranoia poison our marriage.
Brandon, the hotel receipt.
Was a work retreat, which I told you about.
You never told me.
I did. You just don't listen.
He stood up, picked up his coffee mug and said,
You know what your problem is, Dominique? You think being suspicious makes you smart. It just makes you difficult to live with.
He walked out of the kitchen. I heard the TV come on in the living room. I stood at that table for a long time looking at those papers, second-guessing myself, running back through every conversation every evening, trying to find the gap, the place where I had misheard or misread or misunderstood. That is what gaslighting does. It doesn't just make you doubt the other person. It makes you doubt your own mind, your own eyes, your own memory. That afternoon, his mother, Cheryl, called. I didn't think much of it. She called every Sunday. But this time, she said, I just want you to know, Dominique, that Brandon works so hard for this family. A man like that needs a wife who lifts him up, not one who's always questioning him. Yes, ma'am. After I hung up, I sat very still for a moment. He had called his mother before I even got off the kitchen floor. That night, I opened my laptop, not to work on Edurise. I went to the Veridian employee directory and looked up the name of a colleague who had once mentioned in passing that her sister was a family law attorney. I didn't call anyone yet. I just wrote the name down. But something had shifted in me. Something quiet and cold and resolute. The kind of shift you can't undo once it happens. Looking back now, I know exactly what that feeling was. It was the last time I was going to let Brandon Carter make me doubt what I could see with my own eyes. There is a particular kind of grief that comes with discovering your life is not what you believed it to be. It is not loud grief. It is not the kind that makes you scream or throw things or collapse on the floor in a dramatic heap. It is quiet grief, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone you carry everywhere to work, to the grocery store, to bed at night. The kind that makes you look at your own reflection and wonder how long you've been walking around not knowing. That was the grief I lived in during the winter of 2017 into 2018. I had written down the name of that attorney. I had not called her yet, because a part of me, a stubborn, hopeful, terrified part of me, was still looking for another explanation, still trying to find the version of events where Brandon was telling the truth, and I was the one who had gotten everything wrong. I'm not ashamed of that. I understand now that it was not weakness. It was the last act of a woman who had loved someone completely and was not ready to accept that the love had been a performance on one side. But the truth has a way of making itself known, whether you are ready for it or not. It was a Wednesday evening in February when I found the phone. Not Brandon's regular phone, his work phone, which he almost never left lying around. He'd come home, gone straight to the shower, and in his rush, he had left his jacket on the kitchen chair. The phone slid halfway out of the breast pocket when I moved the jacket to hang it up. I stood there for a moment, then I picked it up. He had not changed the passcode on this one, our anniversary. 6 digits I still knew by heart. The messages were not hidden. They were right there, threaded and dated going back 11 months. Her name in his phone was saved as T. Nexogen Marketing, but there was nothing professional about a single word in those messages. Not one word. I read enough to know everything I needed to know. Her name was Tanya Reeves. She worked in the marketing department at Nexogen Solutions, Brandon's own company. They had been seeing each other for almost a year. There were messages about weekends away, inside jokes I had never heard. A thread from the night of my recognition dinner where she wrote,
"She really believed you had a client dinner, didn't she?"
And Brandon had replied with a laughing emoji and nothing else. That was the one that got me. Not the hotel receipts, not the jewelry. That laughing emoji, that casual, comfortable cruelty between two people who were laughing at me together. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, folded the jacket, hung it on the hook by the door. Then I walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower so he wouldn't hear me, sat down on the cold tile floor, and I let myself fall apart for exactly 12 minutes. I know it was 12 minutes because I watched the time on my own phone the entire time. I gave myself those 12 minutes because I knew with absolute clarity that I could not afford to still be falling apart when that shower turned off. When Brandon came downstairs, I was standing at the stove reheating leftovers. I handed him a plate. I asked him how his day was.
Fine.
He said that. Then he sat down and picked up his regular phone and started scrolling. I watched him eat and I thought, you have no idea what I just found. You have no idea what is coming. But here is the part that still makes my blood run cold when I think about it.
You seem quiet. You okay?
Brandon looked up from his plate and said that. And I said, I'm fine, just tired.
You work too hard. You should really think about scaling back on that little project of yours. All that extra stress for something that's probably never going to go anywhere anyway.
The project, EduRise, my life's work. The thing I had been building in the dark for over a year while he was spending our money on another woman's dinners and hotel rooms. Something inside me went very, very still. You're probably right, I said. He nodded satisfied and went back to his phone. That night, after he fell asleep, I did 3 things. First, I called Priya and told her everything. She was silent for a long moment, and then she said,
Okay, listen to me. Don't touch anything. Don't confront him. Not yet.
She had a cousin who had been through a brutal divorce, and she knew things I didn't know yet about how quickly men like Brandon moved money when they felt threatened. Second, I opened my laptop and transferred every document related to EduRise, every contract, every filing, every piece of intellectual property to a private cloud account that Brandon had no access to and no knowledge of. Third, I called the attorney, Alicia Monroe. I had looked her up by then. She was a partner at a family law firm on Peachtree Battle Avenue. We had actually overlapped at Georgia Tech by 1 year, though we hadn't known each other well. I left a voicemail at 11:45 at night. I said, "My name is Dominique Carter. I need to speak with you about a divorce. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." My voice did not shake, not once. But here is what I did not know yet, what I would not find out until weeks later. Brandon had already made a move of his own. He had been talking, not to Tanya this time, but to people in my professional circle. There was a venture capital forum in Atlanta that Priya and I had been quietly cultivating relationships with for months. Investors we hoped would be interested in EduRise's next funding round. Brandon knew about this network because I had mentioned it once casually at dinner. I had not thought he was paying attention. He was paying attention. He had reached out to one of those contacts, a man named Gerald Whitmore, who ran a mid-size investment group out of Buckhead, and over drinks at a bar on Ponce de Leon Avenue, Brandon had told him that EduRise was unstable, that the leadership was disorganized, that he had seen the books, which was a lie, he had never seen anything, and that investing would be a mistake. I did not find this out until Priya called me 3 weeks later, shaking with fury after Gerald Whitmore's assistant quietly passed along what had been said. Brandon had not just been unfaithful. He had not just been dismissive and controlling and cruel in the private space of our home. He'd gone outside those walls and actively tried to destroy something I was building, something real, something that had nothing to do with him. That was the moment I stopped grieving. Grief requires some belief that the other person did not fully know what they were doing. What Brandon did to Gerald Whitmore was calculated, deliberate. He woke up one morning and chose to pick up the phone and try to take something from me. When Alicia Monroe called me back the following Tuesday morning, I was ready.
Tell me everything,
she said, and this time I did. Alicia Monroe was not the kind of attorney who held your hand and told you everything was going to be okay. She was the kind who sat across from you with a legal pad and a pen and said,
"Give me facts. Give me dates. Give me everything you can prove."
And then she built you a wall out of it. Our first meeting was at her office on Peachtree Battle Avenue on a Tuesday morning in early March. She had a corner office on the 3rd floor with a view of the trees just starting to bud. She poured me coffee without asking, sat down, and looked at me with the kind of calm that told me she had heard stories like mine before. Maybe worse, maybe not. But she was not going to flinch. I told her about the credit card statements, the work phone, the messages, the Gerald Whitmore situation. I told her about the house, how it was in my name alone, because Brandon's credit history had made it impossible to co-sign when we bought it in 2015. He knew that at the time. What he did not know was that I had never added him to the deed afterward. It had simply never come up, and I had never brought it up. Alicia set down her pen when I told her that. She looked at me for a moment and then she said,
"Dominique, do you understand what that means?"
I said, "I think I'm beginning to." She leaned back in her chair.
"He has been living in your house for 10 years, driving up equity in a property that is solely yours, and he has no legal claim to it whatsoever."
She paused.
"Does he know that—"
"No," I said. "He has never asked." She picked her pen back up.
"Of course he hasn't."
We agreed that I would not file yet, not immediately. Alicia needed time to build the case properly, and I needed time to make sure every financial thread that was mine was cleanly separated before Brandon had any warning that the ground was shifting beneath him. Moving too fast would give him the chance to do more damage, and after the Gerald Whitmore situation, I knew that damage was something he was very willing to do. So I went home, and I waited. And I watched. And what I watched over the next 2 months made my stomach turn. Brandon had grown bolder. That was the only word for it. The careful, calibrated man who had once been strategic about his lies had started to get lazy with them. He stopped pretending to have reasons for coming home late. He would walk in at 9 or 10 at night and just say,
"I was out."
and go upstairs without elaborating. He had stopped looking at me when he talked to me, not in the way of a man who felt guilty, in the way of a man who had already mentally moved on and was simply waiting for the logistics to catch up. And then there was Tanya. I had not seen her face yet, not in person. I had only seen her name in those messages. But Priya, who still had contacts inside Nexigen from a brief consulting engagement 2 years prior, had found out more than I wanted to know. Tanya Reeves was 29 years old. She had been at Nexigen for 3 years. She knew Brandon was married. She had known from the beginning. What I did not expect was the Tuesday afternoon in April when I walked into the Whole Foods on Ponce de Leon Avenue and found myself standing 3 feet away from her in the produce section. I did not know it was her at first. She was just a woman reaching for a bag of oranges. And then she turned slightly and I saw her phone screen, a text thread open, and at the top of it, Brandon's name, and the photo I recognized as his work headshot. She looked up and our eyes met. I do not know if she knew who I was in that moment. Her expression flickered, something uncertain moving across her face, and then she straightened up, looked me directly in the eye and gave me a slow, deliberate smile. The kind that said, I know exactly who you are, and I am not afraid of you. Then she dropped the oranges in her basket and walked away. I stood in that aisle for a full minute before I could make my legs move. That smile, that slow, deliberate, unashamed smile from a woman who was looking at Brandon's wife and feeling nothing but amusement. That was the moment Tanya Reeves stopped being a name in a text thread and became someone I needed to remember. Because I knew with absolute certainty that she would be standing somewhere in the room when everything fell apart. And I wanted her to have a front row seat. That evening, Brandon came home in a good mood. He had brought takeout jerk chicken from the place on Campbellton Road that I used to love. He set the bags on the kitchen counter and said,
Thought you could use a break from cooking.
I set the table. I poured the drinks. I sat down across from him. And then he said something that I have thought about many times since.
You know what I realized today?
He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease, the man of the house in a house that was not his.
I've been undervaluing myself at Nexigen. I've been carrying that sales team for 2 years and letting other people take the credit.
He pointed his fork at me.
That stops now. I'm going for the VP slot, and I'm going to get it.
I said, good for you, Brandon. He nodded. Then he looked at me. Really? Looked at me the way he used to look at me years ago and said,
Nobody's going to take you seriously in that room, Dominique. You walk in somewhere, and people see exactly what you are, someone's assistant. That's just reality, baby. I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm saying it because I want you to be realistic about what you can and can't do.
He said it gently. That was the worst part. He said it the way you say something kind. I picked up my fork. Thank you for the food, I said. He smiled and turned on the TV. I ate every bite of that jerk chicken, and I did not say another word for the rest of the evening. Because I was thinking about something Alicia had told me in our last meeting, that Georgia was a one-party consent state, which meant that any conversation I was a part of, I could legally record without informing the other party. I had downloaded the app 2 weeks prior. It had been running since Brandon walked in the door. That night, I lay next to him in the dark and I thought about Tanya's smile in that grocery store. I thought about Gerald Whitmore sitting across from my husband at a bar on Ponce de Leon Avenue, listening to lies about my company. I thought about that laughing emoji on the work phone, about the night of my recognition dinner and Brandon's empty seat and Sandra Okafor hugging me at the podium in front of 250 people while I stood there alone. Every lie he told me. Every night he came home late and called it work. Every time he looked me in the eye and told me I was not capable, not serious, not real. Something inside me went quiet. Not sad quiet, dangerous quiet. There are moments in your life that split time in two, before and after. Not the dramatic moments you see coming from a distance, the ones you can brace for the ones that hurt but don't surprise you. I mean the quiet ones. The ones that arrive on an ordinary Tuesday night when you are sitting in your own living room in your own house, wearing your own clothes, and the world just shifts beneath your feet, without warning. and you realize that everything you thought you were standing on was never solid ground at all. That Tuesday night was the last week of May. Brandon thought I was asleep. I had gone upstairs at 9:30, said I had a headache, took a glass of water to bed. I had done this twice before in the last month, gone to bed early, waited, listened. Not because I was planning anything specific, just because I had learned that the most honest version of Brandon Carter existed in the 40 minutes after he believed I was unconscious. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, and I heard him downstairs, the low murmur of his voice through the floorboards. A phone call. He did that, sometimes stepped into the kitchen or the back porch and talked in that low register that was designed not to carry. But that night, the kitchen window was open, and the bedroom window was open. And the Atlanta air was warm and still, and it carried sound the way still air does, clearly, completely, without mercy. His voice came up through that open window like smoke.
She has no idea, Tanya. I'm telling you. She thinks she's building something.
A pause. His laugh, that laugh I used to love.
It's a hobby. It's always been a hobby. She's never going to leave because she is scared to death of being alone. That woman would rather stay in a burning house than walk out the door by herself.
I did not move. I lay completely still in that dark room, and I let every word land exactly where it was aimed.
She'll never amount to anything on her own. She needs me. She has always needed me. And deep down, she knows it. That's why she stays.
A longer pause. Tanya's voice on the other end, too faint for me to hear.
I know. Just give me a little more time. I'm working on it. When the moment is right, I'll handle it.
Handle it. I was the it. 10 years of marriage, a house I owned, outright a life I had built with my own hands, and I was the it that he was going to handle when the moment was right. I got out of bed, slowly, quietly. I walked to the bathroom and I closed the door and I sat down on the edge of the tub and I let myself feel the full weight of what I had just heard. Not the anger would come later, clean and useful. Right now there was just the grief. The deep cellular grief of a woman who had finally completely run out of ways to believe she had misunderstood. He did not love me. He had not loved me in a very long time. Whatever had been between us in those early years, real or performed, I could no longer tell it was gone. What remained was calculation. I was useful to him. The house, the income, the stability, the appearance of a life that made him look like a man who had things together. I was a prop in a story he was telling everyone else. I cried that night in a way I had not cried in years. Not pretty crying, the ugly, silent, gasping kind that you do when you are trying not to make a sound because the person who caused it is 30 feet away and does not deserve to know how deep the wound goes. I gave myself until 2 a.m. Then I washed my face with cold water, went back to bed, and lay down beside him in the dark. He was already asleep, breathing slow and even. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. The next morning, I called Priya from my car in the Viridian Systems parking garage before I went inside. I told her everything I had heard through that window. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said,
Dom, I need to tell you something. I was going to wait until the numbers were confirmed, but I think you need to hear it now.
She took a breath.
TechCrunch is running a story this morning about Edgerize. The Series B closed yesterday, $22 million. Our names are in the piece, Dom. Both of us? They're calling you the co-founder and CTO of the fastest growing education technology company in the Southeast.
I sat in that parking garage for a long time without speaking. $22 million. 7 years of evenings and weekends and stolen hours and code written after midnight while the man sleeping upstairs told anyone who would listen that his wife would never amount to anything. 7 years of saying yes to Priya in the quiet of building something real in the dark, of keeping a secret so carefully that not even my own husband thought to ask what I was actually doing with my time. $22 million.
Dom, you still there?
I'm here, I said.
Are you okay?
I thought about Brandon's voice through that open window. She has no idea. It's a hobby. She needs me. She has always needed me. Pull up the article, I said. Read me the headline. She did. I closed my eyes and listened to every word. And here is what I felt, and I want to be precise about this because it matters. It was not triumph. Not yet. It was something quieter and more profound than triumph. It was recognition. The feeling of looking at something you built with your own hands and finally being allowed to see it, clearly in full light without anyone standing in front of it, telling you it wasn't real. That was mine. All of it. Every line of code, every late night, every moment I had chosen the work over the argument, the vision over the doubt. Mine. And Brandon, who was at that exact moment sitting at the kitchen table in my house drinking coffee from a mug I bought, getting ready to drive to a job where he was going to spend the day telling people half-truths and calling it sales. Brandon had no idea. I opened the TechCrunch article on my phone. I read it 3 times. Then I screenshot it and sent it to Alicia Monroe with a single line. "We're ready to move." Alicia replied in 4 minutes.
"I'll call you at noon. And Dominique, congratulations."
That evening I came home and made dinner and set the table and sat across from Brandon while he talked about his day and his VP ambitions and some client in Charlotte who was giving him trouble. I listened, I nodded, I refilled his glass. He never once asked about my day. He never once asked about the project. At 8:30 that night, while he watched television in the living room, I sat at my desk in the small office off the hallway, the room he had once suggested I turn into a guest bedroom because...
You barely use it anyway.
And I opened my laptop and began drafting the organizational structure for the combined leadership team of EduRise and its newly acquired subsidiary. The subsidiary was Nexigen Solutions. The acquisition had been quietly in motion for 4 months. The paperwork would be finalized in 3 weeks. I had not told Brandon. I had not told anyone except Priya and Alicia and the 2 board members who were legally required to know. I looked at the org chart on my screen for a long moment. At the top in the box marked Chief Executive Officer was my name, Dominique Elaine Carter. I saved the document, closed the laptop, went to the living room and sat next to my husband on the couch and watched television like it was any other night. But the whole time one thought moved through me like a current. 3 weeks. He has 3 weeks left. And he is spending them here on this couch, in this house, absolutely certain that he has already won. There is a specific kind of power that comes from knowing something the other person does not know. It is not arrogance. It is not cruelty. It is something much quieter than either of those things. It is the feeling of standing in a burning building with your hand on the fire extinguisher while everyone else is still looking for the smoke alarm. It is patience with teeth in it, stillness that has a direction. That was the 2 weeks after the TechCrunch article. I want to be honest with you about something. People hear stories like mine and they imagine the woman in the center of it as someone who always had a plan, someone who was always 5 steps ahead, cool, and strategic from the very beginning. That was not me. For a long time, I was just a woman trying to hold her life together with her hands, while someone she loved kept finding new ways to pull it apart. The strategy came later. The clarity came late. But when it came completely. The Monday after I sent Alicia that screenshot, she called me at noon exactly as promised. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. By the end of that call, I had a timeline, a checklist, and the name of a forensic accountant who specialized in marital asset cases. The first thing Alicia confirmed, and I want you to understand how important this was the house. 2,200 square feet on Cascade Road, Southwest Atlanta, purchased in 2015 for $312,000, currently valued at $480,000. Deed of title, Dominique Elaine Washington Carter, sole owner. Brandon's name was nowhere on that document. Not on the deed, not on the mortgage, nowhere.
He has been living in your house for nearly a decade under the assumption that he had a claim to it. He does not. And in Georgia, absent a formal agreement or title transfer, that is not going to change in a divorce proceeding.
Alicia said that calmly. I asked her what that meant practically.
It means that when this is over, he walks away with what he came in with, which based on what you've shown me is not much.
The second thing we discussed was EduRise. because Priya and I had incorporated separately years before any of this came to a head, and because I had transferred all documentation to a private account the night I found the work phone, and because Brandon had never been a partner investor or employee in any capacity. Edurise was mine, fully, cleanly, legally mine. He had tried to poison the well with Gerald Whitmore. He had not succeeded, partly because Priya had gotten there first with the truth, and partly because our Series B numbers spoke louder than anything Brandon Carter could say over drinks at a bar on Ponce de Leon Avenue.
What he did with Whitmore contacting your investors with false information that is actionable. We may not need to use it, but we will have it.
Alicia said that. I thought about Brandon sitting at that bar, smiling that easy smile, lying about a company he had never once asked a serious question about, trying to take from me the one thing he had never been able to touch. Something inside me went very cold and very clear. I spent that week doing what Alicia called building the record. Every conversation with Brandon that had any relevance, financial, professional, personal, I documented. The recording app on my phone had already captured 3 weeks of evenings. I began keeping a written log as well. Dates, times, exact words. I am a software engineer. I understand systems. I understand that the difference between a system that holds and a system that collapses under pressure is almost always documentation. Brandon noticed nothing. He was in an excellent mood that week. Nexogen had announced internally that they were in acquisition talks with an outside firm, details not yet disclosed, and Brandon had convinced himself this meant opportunity. He came home on Thursday evening and said,
This acquisition could be the best thing that ever happened to my career. New leadership always wants to keep top performers. And I am a top performer.
I said, That's great, Brandon. He pointed at me with a piece of takeout chicken.
You watch. This time next year I'm going to be pulling in more than you. Finally.
I smiled at him across the table. He had no idea who was on the other side of that acquisition. He had no idea that I had spent the previous 48 hours in video calls with the Nexogen board of directors, finalizing the terms of a deal that would make Edurise the parent company of the organization that currently signed his paychecks. But there is something I have not told you yet. Something that happened that Thursday evening that I need you to know about because it is the reason I stopped feeling any ambivalence about what was coming. After dinner, Brandon's mother, Cheryl, came by. She did that sometimes unannounced, which I had long since stopped commenting on. She sat at our kitchen table and Brandon poured her sweet tea and they talked while I cleaned up. I was at the sink with my back to them, and I do not think either of them remembered I was in the room. Baby, I ran into Denise from your old neighborhood today. She asked about you two.
What did you tell her?
I told her my son was doing wonderfully, taking care of his family. A pause. How long are you going to keep this up, Brandon? Or with that girl from your job? My hands went still in the dishwater.
Ma, not now.
I'm just saying, you need to think about what you want. And if it's not Dominique. She stopped, then continued. She's not a bad woman, but she has always been more focused on herself than on this family. Some women are just like that. I did not turn around. I stood at that sink with my hands in the water, and I listened to my mother-in-law, a woman I had cooked for, driven to doctor's appointments, bought birthday gifts for, called every Sunday for 10 years, tell her son that I was too focused on myself. That I was the problem. That the question was not whether Brandon was going to stop what he was doing, but when he was going to finish deciding between his wife and his girlfriend. And Brandon said nothing to defend me, not one word.
I know, Ma. I know.
I dried my hands on the dish towel, folded it neatly over the oven handle, turned around. Cheryl. I said, Can I get you anything else before you head out? No, thank you, baby. I'm fine. She smiled at me, warm as Sunday morning. I smiled back. Then I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and called Priya. Tell me something good, I said.
The acquisition closes in 11 days.
I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. 11 days, I said.
11 days, she said. And then Dominique, the whole board sees your name at the top. Every single person in that company. All at once.
I thought about Cheryl's warm smile at my kitchen table. I thought about Brandon saying, "I know, Ma. I know." I thought about Tanya Reeves in the Whole Foods with her slow, deliberate smile and her basket of oranges and Brandon's name lit up on her phone screen. I thought about 10 years of Sunday mornings on a porch that belonged to me in a house that belonged to me, next to a man who had been planning his exit while I was busy trying to save something that was already gone. 11 days, I said again. I smiled into the phone. Not sad, not angry, ready. The last 11 days of that marriage were the strangest days of my life. Not because anything dramatic happened. That was exactly the point. Nothing dramatic happened. The dishes got washed. The bed got made. Dinner was on the table most evenings. Brandon came and went and talked about himself, and I listened and nodded and refilled his glass and said the right things at the right times. From the outside, from any angle that was not mine, it looked like an ordinary household running on ordinary rhythms. But underneath that surface, everything was in motion. Alicia had filed the divorce petition the previous Friday sealed and held ready to be formally served at the precise moment we chose. The forensic accountant had completed his review of the joint accounts and confirmed what I already suspected. Brandon had been quietly redirecting a portion of his Nexigen expense reimbursements into a personal account I was not supposed to know about. Not a massive amount, but enough. Enough to matter in court. Enough to tell a story about a man who had been preparing his own exit while keeping me in the dark. He was planning to leave me. He had been planning it for a while. He just wanted to make sure he took as much as he could carry on his way out the door. Alicia added it to the file. Edurize's legal team finalized the Nexigen acquisition paperwork on a Wednesday. I signed the last document at 4 p.m, sitting at my desk in the Edurize offices on West Peachtree Street, an office Brandon had never visited in a building he had driven past 100 times without knowing his wife's name was on the lease. The acquisition would be announced to Nexigen staff the following Monday morning via a company-wide video call. All senior leadership required to attend in person. Brandon was senior leadership. That Friday evening, Brandon decided to celebrate. He did not know what he was celebrating exactly, just the general feeling of things going his way. The acquisition announcement was coming Monday. He had told himself a story about what that meant for his future, and that story had been playing on a loop in his head all week, getting bigger and more golden every time he retold it. He invited 4 couples over, friends of his, mostly people I had always been politely cordial with, but never fully at ease around. He ordered catering from a Creole restaurant in Decatur. He put bourbon on the counter and told everyone to help themselves. I wore a simple black dress. I helped set the table. I poured drinks and laughed at the right moments and made sure everyone's plates were full. And then about an hour into the evening, when the bourbon had been flowing long enough to loosen things up, Brandon stood at the head of the table, my table, in my house in my dining room, and raised his glass.
I want to make a toast.
Everyone quieted. He looked around the table with that easy, expansive smile, the smile that had once made me feel like everything was going to be okay.
Things are about to change in a big way for our family. I'm not at liberty to share details yet.
He tapped his nose, looked pleased with himself.
But let's just say the next chapter is going to look very different. Very different.
His friend Marcus said, "Does this mean you're finally going to be making more than your wife?" Laughter around the table.
That is exactly what it means, my brother. Finally.
Brandon grinned and pointed at Marcus.
I've been patient. I've been building. And now it's time. Some people in this house have been playing small for a long time. That's all I'm going to say about that.
More laughter. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip. Playing small. Said by a man who was standing in my house, surrounded by furniture, I had chosen celebrating a future that existed entirely inside his own imagination. Said in front of his friends who laughed on cue, because that is what people do when a man performs confidence at a dinner table and nobody knows enough to challenge it. I smiled at him across the table. He winked at me, the wink of a man who believed he was about to win. I thought, enjoy this. Enjoy every second of this. You have 60 hours left. Later that night, after the guests had gone, and Brandon was loading the last of the glasses into the dishwasher, whistling to himself, he said, without turning around,
Good night tonight. Good energy. You were good by the way you kept it together even when Marcus was being Marcus.
He closed the dishwasher, turned around, leaned against the counter, and looked at me with something that might have been affection in another life.
You know, for all your flaws, and there are a few, you do know how to hold a room.
I looked at him for a moment. Thank you, I said. He pushed off the counter and headed toward the stairs.
Oh, Monday morning I've got that company meeting at 8 in the morning. Big announcement about the acquisition. I'll probably be home late because we'll all go out after.
He stopped at the bottom of the stairs.
This is going to be my moment, Dominique. I can feel it. Everything I've been working toward, it's all coming together.
He said it with complete sincerity, standing at the foot of the stairs in a house he did not own, about to go to sleep next to a woman he had spent years diminishing, absolutely certain that the universe was arranging itself in his favor. I'm sure it will be, I said. He went upstairs. I stood in the kitchen for a moment after I heard the bedroom door close. I looked around at the clean counters, the folded dish towel, the lights above the stove, casting everything in a warm amber glow. This kitchen where I had eaten 1,000 meals, where I had cried into the dishwater and swallowed things that deserved to be said out loud, where I had stood at the sink and listened to his mother write me off in the kindest possible voice. I turned off the lights one by one. Then I went to the small office off the hallway, the room Brandon had once suggested I turn into a guest bedroom. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and sent one final email to Alicia Monroe. 3 words. Monday, we're ready. I closed the laptop, sat for a moment in the dark. Then I went upstairs, got into bed next to my husband for the last time, and slept better than I had in years. Monday morning came in quiet and golden the way Atlanta mornings do in early summer, that particular quality of light that turns everything soft before the heat sets in. I was up at 5:30, showered, dressed, standing in the kitchen with my coffee before the neighborhood birds had fully committed to making noise. I put on the navy blazer. The one Brandon had once told me made me look too aggressive, too much, like I was trying too hard to be something I wasn't. I buttoned it slowly in the hallway mirror and looked at myself for a long moment. 37 years old, a woman from Savannah whose mama had driven 4 hours in church shoes to watch her walk across a stage. A woman who had spent 7 years building something real in the dark while someone tried to convince her that the dark was all there was. I looked good. I picked up my bag and my keys and I walked out of that house at 6:15 in the morning without waking Brandon up, without leaving a note, without looking back at the porch where we used to sit on Sunday mornings drinking coffee and talking about nothing and everything. I had already said everything I needed to say, just not to him, not yet. I drove to the Edurize offices on West Peachtree Street. Priya was already there. She had arrived before me, which was typical. She had coffee waiting and a look on her face that was equal parts excitement and the particular focused calm of a woman who had been waiting a long time for a specific morning to arrive.
How are you feeling?
Ready, I said. We went through the final checklist together. The video call was set up in the main conference room at Nexigen, their building on Peachtree Center Avenue, 7 blocks from where we were sitting. At 8 in the morning, every member of Nexigen's senior leadership team would be seated in that room for what they had been told was a formal acquisition briefing. Mandatory attendance, business formal. Brandon would be in that room. Tanya Reeves, whose role in Nexigen's marketing department made her senior enough to be included, would be in that room. At 8 o'clock, exactly the screen at the front of that conference room would connect to our feed. And the first face those people would see, the first voice they would hear as the CEO of the company that now owned theirs, would be mine. I want to tell you something about that morning, about the 20 minutes before 8 o'clock. I was not nervous. I want to be clear about that. I had stood in boardrooms before. I had presented to investors, defended technical architecture to rooms full of skeptical engineers, built a company from nothing to $22 million in funding, while running on 4 hours of sleep and pure belief. I was not nervous. What I felt was something I do not have a perfect word for. A kind of completion. The feeling of a long equation finally resolving on the right side. At 7:58, I nodded to Priya. She started the connection. At 8 o'clock exactly, I walked into frame. Later, I would hear from two different people who were in that Nexigen conference room about what happened in the seconds after my face appeared on that screen. I want to give you the full picture because you deserve to see it. The room had been buzzing the low, self-important energy of sales professionals and marketing directors who believed they were about to receive information that would benefit them. Brandon was seated near the center of the long conference table in the chair that put him visible from the door, the chair that a man chooses when he wants to be seen. He had his portfolio open in front of him, a pen in his hand, the posture of a man ready to take notes on his own future. Tanya Reeves was seated 4 chairs to his left. Close enough that several of their colleagues had noticed over the months, in the way that colleagues always notice even when they say nothing. The screen at the front of the room came to life. And then I said, "Good morning, everyone. My name is Dominique Carter. I am the CEO of EduRise. And as of this morning, I am also the CEO of the combined entity that now includes Nexigen Solutions. I want to start by saying that I am genuinely excited about what we are going to build together. But first, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the team that has brought Nexigen to where it is today. I kept my voice warm, professional, completely steady. And then I watched through the small window of the camera feed on my screen what happened in that room. The color left Brandon's face like someone had pulled a drain. Not gradually, all at once. One moment, he was the man with the pen and the portfolio and the chair near the door. The next moment, he was gray. Actually gray, the particular ashen shade of a person whose body has understood something before their mind has caught up. His pen stopped moving. His hand that had pointed at me across dinner tables and waved away my ambitions like smoke, started to tremble. Slightly at first, then enough that the pen rolled off the portfolio and hit the table with a small sound. He looked up at the screen, then down at the table, then back up at the screen. His mouth opened slightly. Nothing came out. 4 chairs to his left, Tanya Reeves had gone completely still. That slow, deliberate smile that she had given me in the Whole Foods on Ponce de Leon Avenue, it was nowhere on her face now. She was staring at the screen with the expression of a woman rapidly recalculating every decision she had made in the last year. She picked up her phone from the table, looked at it, put it back down. Did not look at Brandon, not once. I spoke for 12 minutes. I outlined the organizational transition, the new leadership structure, the timeline for integration. Professional, clear, the CEO of the room. When I finished, I said, "I look forward to meeting each of you in person very soon. For any questions about your specific role in the new structure, please connect with HR by end of day. Thank you." The feed ended. I heard later that the room was silent for almost 30 seconds after the screen went dark. And then Brandon stood up. His chair scraped back hard against the floor. He picked up his portfolio with hands that were still not steady and walked out of the conference room without saying a word to anyone. He walked directly into Alicia Monroe. She was standing in the hallway outside that conference room with 2 copies of a legal document and the calm, measured expression of a woman who had spent 15 years in family law and had seen every possible human reaction to this particular moment.
Mr. Carter, my name is Alicia Monroe. I represent Dominique Carter. I have been asked to hand-deliver these to you directly. You've been served.
He stared at her. She did not look away. He took the papers. His hands were shaking badly enough now that he had to grip them with both hands to keep them from sliding. He looked down at them, then up at Alicia.
I need to talk to her. I need to talk to Dominique.
You are welcome to have your attorney contact my office.
I don't need an attorney. I need to...
He stopped, swallowed.
Please, just let me talk to her. 5 minutes?
I had anticipated this. Alicia stepped aside. I was standing at the end of that hallway, navy blazer, coffee in hand, completely still. He walked toward me and I watched him move. And I thought about every version of this man I had known. The man on the rooftop of the Lowe's Atlanta Hotel going down on one knee. The man who used to say my wife is the smartest woman in any room. The man through the open window. The man at the dinner table pointing his fork. The man who called his mother before I got up off the kitchen floor. He stopped in front of me. His eyes were red at the edges. His jaw was tight.
Dominique, I didn't know. I didn't know it was you. I had no idea.
Yes, you did, I said. You knew exactly who I was. You just didn't know what I was capable of. There's a difference.
Please, we can figure this out. Whatever you want, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't do this. Not here. Not like this.
I looked at him for a long moment. Remember when you told me I was just a coder? That I sat in a corner and typed and that wasn't real leadership? How did it feel to hear my name at the top of that org chart, Brandon, in front of all your colleagues, in front of Tanya? He flinched. You're not sorry, I said quietly. You're just sorry you got caught living a life you didn't build. I took one step back. My attorney will be in touch with yours. Have a good day. I turned and walked down that hallway, and I did not look back once. Behind me, I heard him say my name one more time.
Dominique.
Just my name in that broken voice, to an empty hallway. I pushed open the door at the end of the corridor and walked out into the Atlanta morning. The sun was full up now, bright and direct and warm on my face, and my navy blazer and my shoulders that had been carrying the weight of that man's opinion of me for 10 years. I stood on the sidewalk on Peachtree Center Avenue and I breathed. Just breathed. Later that afternoon, Priya called me with one final piece of information. After the meeting, after Brandon had been escorted out of the building by HR, with a separation agreement in hand, Tanya Reeves had submitted her resignation from Nexogen, effective immediately, citing a new opportunity. She had cleaned out her desk and left the building before noon. She had not texted Brandon, had not called, had simply gone. That evening, Alicia sent me a message.
Cheryl Carter called my office today. She wanted me to know that she is no longer in contact with her son and has no intention of being involved in these proceedings. She also said, and I am quoting directly here, "Tell Dominique, I am sorry." I should have seen it sooner.
I read that message twice. Then I put my phone down and looked out the window of the Ed Uri's office at the Atlanta skyline going pink and gold in the evening light. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt the full, clean, uncomplicated sensation of being exactly where I was supposed to be. 6 months after that Monday morning on Peachtree Center Avenue, I sold the house on Cascade Road. I want to tell you how that felt, because people always ask. They ask about the divorce decree, about the settlement, about the legal details. And yes, all of that happened. The divorce was finalized in 4 months. Brandon walked away with what he came in with, which was, as Alicia had predicted, not much. The joint accounts were divided. His personal account, the one he thought I did not know about, was factored into the settlement in a way that his attorney described in writing as highly unfavorable to my client. The recording app had captured enough to make certain conversations about Gerald Whitmore very expensive for Brandon to explain. He did not fight it. Not really. A man who had spent 10 years believing he held all the cards does not know how to play the hand he is actually holding. But the house. People always want to know about the house. I listed it on a Thursday in November. It sold in 9 days for $492,000, $180,000 more than we had paid for it in 2015. I stood in the empty living room the afternoon after the closing. Just me and the afternoon light coming through the windows I had picked out, and the hardwood floors I had refinished twice, and the back porch where we used to sit on Sunday mornings, before I understood what those Sunday mornings were actually built on. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry because the house was not what I was leaving behind. The house was just wood and drywall and square footage. What I was leaving behind was the version of myself who had spent years making herself smaller in those rooms, who had swallowed things that deserved to be said out loud and called it keeping the peace and believed for longer than I should have that peace was worth that price. I said goodbye to that woman in that empty living room. Then I locked the door, dropped the key with the realtor, and drove to my new place. I had found it in October, a 2-bedroom condo on Ponce de Leon Avenue in the Virginia Highland neighborhood. 10th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows on the east side that caught the morning light in a way that made the whole space feel like it was breathing. High ceilings, an open kitchen with an island that I had immediately covered with cookbooks, and a small succulent garden because I could, and because no one was going to tell me it was clutter. I chose every single thing in that apartment, every lamp, every throw pillow, every piece of art on the walls. There was no negotiation, no one sighing at my choices or suggesting something more practical or implying that my taste was too much. I bought a reading chair in a deep teal color that Brandon would have called ridiculous, and I put it directly in front of the east-facing window, and I sat in it every single morning with my coffee. And I watched the Atlanta skyline come to life, and I thought, this is mine. All of it. Every square foot, every morning, every quiet Sunday. Mine. My mama came up from Savannah the first weekend of December to see the new place. Dorothy Jean Washington, 63 years old, still in her church shoes, even on a Saturday walking through my condo with her hands clasped and her eyes taking everything in. She stopped at the east-facing window and looked out at the city for a long moment without saying anything. Baby, this is what I worked for. I crossed the room and held my mother, and we stood at that window together for a long time. And I thought about all the double shifts at Candler Hospital, all the lunches she skipped and the shoes she did not buy, and the vacations she did not take so that I could sit in classrooms and dream bigger than our zip code. I thought about her face in the crowd at Georgia Tech, crying all the way through my graduation. I thought about how she had known long before I did that something was wrong, and how she had waited with the particular patience of a woman who has seen hard things and trusts her daughter to find her way through them. I'm okay, Mama, I told her. I know you are, she said. I always knew you were. At Edurise, things were moving fast. The integration with Nexogen was cleaner than anyone had expected, partly because the teams complemented each other in ways the org chart had always suggested they would, and partly because, as Priya put it, people work better when they know the person at the top actually built something. We launched 2 new product lines in the first quarter, partnerships with school districts in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee, a pilot program in Memphis that Priya had been designing for years and finally had the resources to execute. I hired well. I asked hard questions. I built a leadership team that was not afraid to tell me when I was wrong, which is the only kind of leadership team worth having. Sandra Okafor, my old director from Veridian Systems, the woman who had told me at 22 that the ceiling in this building was not my ceiling, came on as our chief operating officer in February. The day she started, she walked into my office, looked around, and said,
I told you.
I laughed for a long time at that. In the spring, I received an invitation from Georgia Tech to speak at their annual Women in Technology Symposium. I said yes immediately. I stood at a podium in front of 400 students, young women in their 20s, sitting where I had once sat, carrying what I had once carried, dreaming in the particular, anxious, hopeful way of people who are smart enough to see the distance between where they are and where they want to be. And I told them the truth, not the polished version, the real one, about the years of building in the dark, about the voices that told me to know my lane, about the specific insidious damage that is done to a woman when the person closest to her makes a project out of making her small. I told them that the most dangerous thing anyone ever said to me was not go away or you can't do this. It was know your lane said, softly by someone I loved, said often enough that I almost started to believe it. And I told them what I know now, what it took me 10 years and one Monday morning in a navy blazer to fully understand. Your lane goes as far as you are willing to take it, and the people who tell you otherwise are not protecting you. They are protecting themselves from what you might become if you stop listening. There was a moment near the end of that evening after the applause, after the students had come forward with their questions and their business cards and their careful, hopeful eyes, when I was standing alone near the edge of the stage, and I looked out at that auditorium. The same building where I had sat 22 years old and terrified and certain that the distance between who I was and who I wanted to be was too great to cross. I thought about Brandon's voice through that open window. She has no idea. It's a hobby. She needs me. I thought about that laughing emoji. I thought about Tanya's smile in the produce section, about Cheryl's warm voice telling me I was too focused on myself, about dinner tables and empty chairs and recognition awards held alone on a stage, about 12 minutes crying on a cold bathroom floor, and a recording app running in my pocket, and a name on a deed, and a company built in the dark. I thought about all of it. And then I let it go. Not because it did not matter, but because I had carried it long enough and it was not mine to carry anymore. It belonged to the woman I used to be. The woman who had already done her job, who had survived and documented and planned and held on and built and waited and walked down that hallway in a navy blazer and said what needed to be said. She was done. I was just getting started. My name is Dominique Elaine Carter. I am 37 years old. I am the CEO of Edurise. I am my mother's daughter, Georgia Tech class of 2008, born in Savannah and built in Atlanta. I am the woman who coded through the night while someone told her she was nothing. I am the woman who signed the papers that ended 10 years of smallness on a Wednesday afternoon at a desk in a building her husband drove past every day without knowing her name was on the lease. I am not what he said I was. I am not what he needed me to be. I am what I chose to become. And that choice, that quiet, persistent 7 years in the making choice to keep building anyway, that is the thing nobody can ever take from you. Not a husband, not a mother-in-law, not a woman with a slow smile in a grocery store, not a man who laughs into a phone through an open window at the woman downstairs who is already 3 steps ahead of him. They can take a lot of things. They cannot take what you build when they are not looking. To anyone out there who is sitting in a room right now where someone is telling you to know your lane, I want you to hear me clearly. Your lane is yours. Drive it like you built it, because you did. If this story moved you, if any part of it felt like something you've lived or something you've survived, I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. Tell me where you're at in your journey. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share this with them. Don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because the next story is already waiting, and it goes even deeper than this one. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. Never let anyone convince you otherwise.